Welcome to What the Fit, a podcast about what it means to be fit, whatever the fuck that means. I'm with a very special, exciting guest today, Krista Powers. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm so
you.
happy to be here.
Like we just said, these conversations seem to always come up at the absolute perfect time. And this conversation, I know about your new book, Good Grief, Inviting Grief to be a Catalyst for Growth. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm so excited. This has been so top of mind for me lately. And I think when we met earlier in the summer, that was summer, yeah?
Yeah.
God, where does the time go?
Time is funky.
Yeah, it's so funky. When we met earlier in the summer, I had said it was soon after I just kind of put out my rebrand for the podcast and moved to video and all of that. And I'd said, like, this is a grief podcast. Like, it's a grief podcast disguised as a lifestyle, fitness, health and wellness podcast. But, like, what I really hope, what, like, my mission here is to bring awareness to people around grief and really to kind of transform the way we think about it, which I think is what your goal with this book is.
It's absolutely my goal. I feel like we have to continue to add additional perspectives. I always think about kaleidoscope. Can we just turn the topic a little bit and have a different perspective?
Yeah. You wrote in the book that you want people to become more familiar with grief to release our resistance to it, and that it's inescapable. It is interwoven in our life. It is our life.
Yes.
And which is why we kind of need to like seek to evolve this perspective that we have around grief.
Absolutely. So I think that grief happens every single day.
Every
to all
day.
Of us.
All the time.
Yes. And it can be, I'm not making light of the fact of losing a loved one by any means. That's, I think, big grief and the big monumental moments.
And I think what people often think about when they think about grief, they think about, oh, someone dying.
Yes.
But
exactly.
It's more.
It's so much
that.
more.
Yeah.
I mean, in the book, I make mention of, it can be the whole spectrum of a loved one dying, a divorce, a layoff from your job. It can also then be the perspective of something that is going to happen. I talk to a lot of friends whose kids are going off to college, and it's this whole grief experience for them as parents, and even for the young person stepping into a new phase of life. And then it can be all the way down to like your hot water heater busting, right? And leaking all over the floor. It's an interruption.
Yeah.
And it's a change in your flow of what's going on.
Yeah. I think it was first evident for me. So I had lost my younger brother in 2018, and then COVID happened in 2020. And so I had just gone through this traumatic grief experience and, was far enough out of it, a couple years out of it, that I did have some ability to look back and reflect at that time. And when COVID was happening, I was, talking to friends and seeing people and their reactions and how they were adapting or not adapting. And I was looking around and I was like, this is grief. Yes. Like what everyone's experiencing right now is grief.
Yes. Because I think in COVID, what we all learned was what we knew, our routines and our habits got turned upside down.
They were no more.
Exactly.
At least for a period of time.
Yes.
And I would argue maybe not ever the same again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we had to figure out new ways. I feel like, do you remember the big word was pivot? Like what's your pivot during COVID and how do you show up differently to work through all the details? And I just really do believe that grief is something, it's rooted in transition. It's letting go of one thing to make room for the new or next thing. And it's not necessarily fun or exciting because we like our creature comforts. We like to know what's happening and be in control.
Yeah.
And yet, what if we allow grief to be more of a friend versus something that we resist with every ounce of energy in us?
Where do you think, I think people may hear seeing grief as a friend to be this completely radical, insane thought.
Yes. I agree with that. So I have two thoughts around that. The first is, while writing the book, I interviewed a couple dozen people. And at the end of every interview, I asked two questions. So they would focus on some specific issue of grief that they had lived through. And at the end of this vulnerable, really beautiful conversation, I asked, what would you say to grief? And many times they would say, fuck you and thank you to grief. And they would like get really grounded in the, wow, as much as I want to cuss at it and throw my arms at it, I also want to thank it for what it has done for me and brought me. And then I would ask, what would grief say to you? And as they went deeper with that question, there was a softness that occurred, like just unanimously between the people that I talked to. And that's where I think grief actually, when we take time to sit with it and become familiar, whether it's a 1 hour conversation with somebody interviewing you for a book or a deeper unpacking, it actually can be a companion. And one of the people I interviewed actually said, you know, I think what happens is grief knocks on the door, but then shame and anger and embarrassment rush in and they talk really loudly and they take over the whole space. And grief is just kind of sitting in the corner saying, hey, I'm here and I want to like connect with you. But we give it a bad rap, quite honestly.
Because oftentimes too, it doesn't feel good.
Right.
Yeah. In the body,
Yeah.
the experience of it, right? And especially I think if for big, let's just use this kind of term, like big grief, like the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, something that really is kind of like taking you completely out of your element. Like it's so uncomfortable. And especially I think for the majority of us, the majority of people who aren't able to sit with any sort of discomfort, that it then becomes like, I need to avoid this at all costs.
Absolutely. It feels heavy, right? Or like you're digging your heels in and somebody's trying to pull you.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is our cultural experience around grief. And yet that's our culture. There's other cultures who view it very differently.
Right.
And it's just interwoven into daily life. So I'm not coming with some radical idea here.
Right.
You know,
right.
there's other examples that we can learn from as well, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's why these conversations are so important, is to give people a different lens to look at the experience that they're going through. One, to like call it what it is, grief.
Yes.
And then to be able to learn how to integrate and work with it. And, you know, I think of it now. I was having this experience. I'd mentioned that this comes at such a good time. This conversation comes at such a good time. I'm having the last couple of weeks been in what I call like a grief crash out. Like I've had a lot of transition and change in my life recently, you know, losing my job, getting a new job, having a new schedule, having a new routine, the loss of my grandmother at the end of the year, like, you know, new relationships across the board, which then bring up, okay, what, you know, past relationships that maybe need grieving, everything.
Yes.
It's just been a lot of grief. And I kind of call it this crash out because I had been deploying one of my favorite sort of distractions. And that's just like getting an insane to-do list, being very busy, taking on a lot of extra responsibility, all the while trying to make sure I'm doing everything right and everything good and taking care of myself the best. You know, it just becomes this means to like not really sit with my feelings and not really acknowledge the grief and like let the grief in. And in my experience, you can only do that for so long.
Right.
And then it's going to come for you.
I agree. That's where I really actually believe that my breast cancer was an experience of grief that it needed to rattle me and get my attention. And that's when I hear you, because I also am a list writer and a doer when I'm trying to get through other things that are, you know, crashing me out, like you're saying. And we can't do our way through it. We have to we're human beings, not human doings.
Right. And it's like, I knew that.
Yeah.
Right? I know that.
Yeah.
But yet still it comes
that
up.
Self-protection.
Yes, it comes up, it resurfaces. And, you know, I had my crash out. I, you know, used my resources and my tools and my community and my support and, you know, myself, and, you know, was at a better place, got to a good place. And I thought again, I was like, you know, I'm going to experience these like pretty intense feelings of grief now that I've let it in. So now that I've kind of let it in, it's there, right? Like I've got to be with it. And as I was thinking about it, like kind of coming home from work in a very like, you know, in a lone state, right? It's late at night. It's just me, you know, I'm just, you know, whatever I've got done doing. And you know, that feeling kind of creeps in of like, you know, just the pain and loneliness and sadness and all of it. And I thought about it as I was walking to my stairs. I was like, okay, here it is again. Here it is again. And I'm going to lay in my bed and I'm going to be with it. It's going to be there. And I'm going to wake up maybe tomorrow, the next, whatever. And I'm going to feel joy and I'm going to feel gratitude. I'm going to be in another place again. You know, it was almost just like, all right, let's go, you know, like, come on.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's so listening to you, what I hear is a bit of, so I created something called the 5 powers of grief, and we'll talk about them.
Yeah, we will.
Yet with them, for each power of grief, I believe there's a spectrum. And on one end is the heavy dynamic of that power of grief. And in the middle, there's a neutral perspective, and then there's a powerful perspective. So I think we typically live in the heaviness of grief, and yet you're tuning into the gentle awareness and the curiosity of like, oh, there it is again. It's creeping up, you know, and really paying attention to yourself. Perhaps, though, not trying to make the big leap from heavy to powerful, right? There's stepping stones.
There's stepping stones. Yeah. And I think maybe what I was kind of thinking about, I'll get to that. I'll get to that place, right? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like that. I've felt that before. And it was almost kind of a powerful feeling in that like, oh, I've been here and I've done it and I can do it again, you know, and like that I get to do it again. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that language, don't you feel like it supports so many people when they listen to you say, I get to do it again? It's like, oh, I never thought of it that way, but it's really powerful.
I mean, it's still, you know, if I'm being honest, it's still something that I wrestle with because it's tough. It's just like tough being human. It's tough going through change. It's tough not being in control or like knowing what's going to come next. And our brain loves familiarity and, you know, like repeating same things over again and to like go against the grain. Like it's tough, but it's worth it.
It is. Have you seen kind of of course, the message of we can do hard things. Yes. And then I really like the message that's out there that talks about how many of the hard things have you gotten through in your life? And the answer is all of them.
Every single one.
We didn't think so in the moment. Yeah. We thought it was going to take us out and take us down. And yet, you know, here we are on the other side of those obstacles.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get into the 5 powers of grief, let's just learn a little bit about you, Krista.
Sure.
So how did you get into this work? You know, what led you to writing this book?
So from a very young age, like as a little kid, my heart was directed to old people. So I've always had this inclination to really be drawn to people who were in the aging and death and dying realm. And so I was never afraid of it. I never leaned out of that. And as a result, I went into social work as my profession vocation. And through that path, I've always worked with, again, the aging population. And for the longest time, I thought my like stake in the sand was I am going to be part of the revolution of changing our cultural norms on aging, death, and dying. And that's
also
what I said.
Incredible.
Yes. Yeah. And within the past, I say 5, maybe up to 10 years, what I realized was, oh, it's much bigger than that. It's not just about death and dying. It is about grief, and grief is
living
present.
with it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. You get to touch more people.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like through my life and the different decades of life, like in my 20s, I had thyroid cancer. In my 30s, I got divorced and I also buried the man that I was married to. In my 40s, I had breast cancer. So it's like these milestone moments of, oh shit, you know, that had like took the rug out from under my feet. And it was like, what am I going to do with it? And I feel really fortunate that I come from a background and family that said, okay, there's a lot of shades of gray. Like it's not all good, all bad. Where's the gold in the midst of what's happening here?
Yeah. Amazing. And you had a book before this as well, right?
It's called Midlife Calm, an alternative to midlife crisis.
Yeah.
And really, again, that's not just for people in midlife. It's really the whole message is about getting in touch with our authentic selves. And if that means that you're quirky, or if that means you have the resources to go buy a sports car, or the things that we call a midlife crisis, are they a crisis? Like, let's get
or are
a
they
little
like
bit
coming back to ourselves?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. That's great. Okay. I think we should dive into the 5 powers of grief, because I want to make sure that we have ample time to talk about them. Okay. So first, I guess, give us like what, not necessarily a dive into each one, but like, where did the 5 powers of grief come from for you?
Sure. Life. Lived life, right? So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in July of 2023, and it was a 17-month process of treatments and surgeries and all of that. However, just before being diagnosed, I had already had an outline of the 5 powers of grief, and I had led a retreat. And I think it's just really interesting that it feels like a little bit of foreshadowing that I needed to deeply live the powers of grief.
They're like, you made this, and now
right, like give it a practice run. Yeah, I'm like, all right, thanks. So I think ultimately the language came from just having a bit of downtime throughout breast cancer, which never would I think I'd say thank you to that diagnosis. And yet a bit of that downtime to get really clear about what's going on within me, and then also lifting my head and looking at what's going on with other people, and really identifying the language and saying, okay, these are powers, like superpowers of grief, if we can tap into them and pay attention. Yeah. So you want me to just share what they are?
Yeah. So the 5 powers are...
So the first is the interruption, right? And that's the diagnosis, the car accident, the divorce, the death. And it's just like
the interruption is like the event.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yes.
Okay. The tangible event, we know what it is.
Precisely.
Something happens. And to our point earlier, it can be in any kind of degree of severity. Let's call it. Yeah. Impact. Let's call it.
Yes. Exactly. So, and then the second power of grief is flow of feelings. And this is where a lot of people might be familiar with the stages of grief that they were researched by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back in the 60s. And those are, denial and anger and bargaining and acceptance.
Yeah.
What's interesting is those were created for people who were terminally ill and dying.
I found that so interesting when I read the book, and I was like, well, that makes more sense.
Right.
Because I know in my experience, like that, I didn't necessarily kind of fit for me at all the time, or I felt like they were kind of like rigid categories. And I felt that they were almost like a little bit misleading. And this just might be me, but I always use this example, this denial piece of the stages of grief. When my brother died, I kind of assumed, because we would learn about this in school, you would hear this around, and maybe I didn't really have something to put it into practice yet in my life.
Sure.
But I had, always thought about denial. Oh, people will say like it didn't happen. Like like that was the denial piece.
Right. You're like, well, it happened. It's right in front of my face and in my life.
For sure.
He's gone.
Right. And then what I didn't like consider was that like what came for me in the form of denial was thinking like, oh, my life's going to be not going to change. Like I had a podcast recording the next week. Like, I just got to push it back 1 week, and like. Everything, like I'll be able to get back into my routine is literally what I thought in my mind.
Right.
Like that's the denial. Like, no, this has shifted you forever.
Absolutely.
But it's also like, how would I wouldn't even know. My brain has just been scrambled.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? It didn't help me to like come to terms with that. With my grief. It was more just like, well, here's what you're going to feel, broad spectrum.
Yes.
And it wasn't helpful.
Well, and that's where I think that the feelings are really important, and also a part of our culture that we get to dive in a lot more and pay attention to our feelings and notice them and honor them and then release them. But they're not the whole story. And so that's why I name it as one of the 5 powers of grief. So that's kind of where Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work resides, kind of within mine. And I'm building on. Feelings. Exactly. Yeah, flow of feelings.
Flow of feelings.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, feel them too, right? I mean, you're on it. Yeah. So then the third power of grief is holding. And I say this because I believe holding is kind of like that white knuckle. You're like, oh man, this interruption just happened. I have a swirl of feelings going on. And above anything, I just want to go back to before the interruption. I wish that it hadn't happened. Like all of that of, can I get back to what was before? And so it's like just
I
holding
spend a
on
lot
to
of
that.
time in holding.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. I believe through my just development of this, that the first 3 powers of grief happen. Yep. And they happen within individuals, yet the 4th and 5th are where a lot of magic happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that oftentimes we just come into ourselves and we have our interruption, we have our feelings, and we hold, and we don't necessarily go beyond that. Mm-hmm. So as I kind of then lean into the 4th power of grief, I name it as breaking. Now, the thing is, that doesn't sound exciting. Nobody's like, I want to break the vase, or I want to break my leg, or I want to break myself, right? Yeah. However, if we think about it from the language of, I'm going to break my hold on the past, release that hold, and perhaps even, break some of the stories that we have, break some of the feelings that have been swirling, just breaking what's going on within us. And this is where another grief pioneer, David Kessler, he talks about grief requires a witness. And I think that's where we have to get out of ourselves and invite others to be part of our grief experience. We can't just do it in a silo on our own.
Right.
And by inviting others in, the breaking becomes more possible.
The breaking is hard.
It's so hard. It kind of like gives me goosebumps, like in a way of like my hair standing of,
yeah.
Oh,
like I have
it
to
is
let
really
go.
hard.
It's the letting go of like the thought that you had for the future, a dream you had, a hope you had.
Yeah.
And that feels really tough. Where does that come from though? I wonder. It's just like the brain likes familiarity.
Exactly. And safety, right?
And
like our
safety
brain is
that,
like
yeah.
programmed to protect us above everything else.
Right.
And when we're not feeling our best, when we're sad, when we're lonely, whatever it might be, our brain's like, I'm going to fix this for you. I'm going to like insulate you and make it okay as possible. But we have to kind of break that story and that brain path and plan that's not really working as fully as it should.
Yeah. So the breaking is kind of just like the letting go of like, that was something, that whatever, like, a version of you, a pat, whatever. I think it's really like you're letting go of a past self. Can we say that?
I think we can. Like,
or
if you talk about past you, future you, present you, yeah.
But then I think what gets tough for me there, if I feel like letting go, I'm like, I don't want to. Mm-hmm. Can I don't want to.
And so when I say that within myself, I'm like, oh, I'm holding. I don't want to.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
But why don't I want to?
Well, because you don't know what's next.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I won't say you, I'll say me. Yeah. I didn't have a vision for myself post breast cancer. I felt so dull. I felt like my spirit had been squelched in my light, and that's terrifying. So I'm like, well, I know what I was like, but I don't know how to take what I am now and make myself sparkly again, which is what I want above all else.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that, like, I just don't know what's ahead.
Don't know what's ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned that, what did you say about needing a witness to grief? That
grief requires a witness.
Why?
I would say because otherwise we're in our own heads and we're in our own houses, and we are not meant to be singular, isolated beings.
We're not.
Right? Like, we're interconnected.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about codependency or dependency, right? Like, it's
no.
Interdependency.
We're social creatures.
Exactly.
Like, we need each other for sure.
And a lot of times I say this in my family and with my friends. One of the most important questions I ask with people when I'm listening to them is, do you want to be heard, helped, or hugged? Mm-hmm. Because I jump to helping. I like to help. I like to be a person of action and service. Yeah, it feels really good.
Yeah, and we don't like seeing people we care about in pain or discomfort. So we want to get them out of it as soon as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet in grief, so many times what people desire and like crave in their gut is just for somebody to sit with them and listen to them. Don't fix a thing. There's nothing to fix.
No.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Right.
I wish you could.
Right.
If you could, I would gladly let you.
Right.
you know? But like, You can't. And so, yeah, no, I had that experience recently where I felt so held and supported in my grief in a way that it was like someone just coming in and being like, I see you.
Yeah.
I see what you're going through. I've felt what you're going through as well. Maybe, you know, not that exact situation, but like I can see on your face.
Yes.
And I've been there. And
yes.
like,
I'm here with you.
I'm here with you.
Yeah.
And that like blew me away, truly.
Yeah.
It was really important. So yes, it makes so much sense that grief needs a witness. And I know for me, oftentimes when I feel like there's nothing that can help me feel better in this moment, being with people I love or care about or talking to that, you know, just like getting that is like the one and only thing that feels helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it's probably not fixing anything. No. And yet it's almost, when I think about breaking, I think about a crack, and it's where the light can shine through. So in the first 3 powers of grief, it's like I'm in the dark, and yet the crack of the breaking is where the energy from the people who love you, who can listen to you and put their arm around you or go for a walk, can show up and offer some light.
Yeah. Definitely.
And some air and some breeze, you know, all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final.
So the 5th power of grief I name as remembering. And I'm really careful to pull those apart because I it's not about in our heads remembering. It's really about, I guess, this image. So if we've broken into 100 pieces, like a vase in front of us, shattered pieces, and that's us.
I felt that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where you actually take some of the pieces and you create a mosaic. And so that is the remembering of ourselves, where there's some pieces from the past and there's some pieces from right now, and perhaps some pieces of what's my hope and vision for the future based on where I am today. And you create a new mosaic and you show up present and resilient and in possibility again.
Yeah. And these powers, do we flow through them?
Well, not linear, right? Okay. I mean, like that'd be super great. Yeah. However, I think that we cycle through them. You had mentioned earlier in the conversation where things get stirred up at different times. And so, you know, the memory of your brother, that relationship, or, you know, the experience of COVID that we all lived through, it might pop up now, years later. And it most likely is going to, and have a whole new flow of feelings, a whole new holding, a whole new breaking. So I think it's cyclical.
Yeah.
To me, I think they kind of flow in the order that I said, and yet they could rapid cycle through them, or you could say stuck in one for a bit.
That's like the funniest part about grief, right? You're like, oh, you think you can like feel it all, and then it'll be like wrapped up, and there it is. And then you're like, you know, years later,
you're like
taking a walk and see a leaf on a tree, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you're like in pieces again. Yes. Yeah,
you're like, I thought we did this, but like, I think this is exactly what we were talking about a little bit earlier, of like breaking down. I love how you did this, you know, kind of breaking down of the word grief, because I think, you know, to have more language and a better understanding around it can help us integrate it more easily into our lives and just like conceptualize it, you know, for people that works for. And I'm one of those people. Yeah. And, you know, just to really think about this, like, grief is transition. And so, of course, I've heard a lot of grieving people. We'll just call everyone. We're all grieving people. You know, talk about how like the transition of seasons, or the changing of anything can trigger grief. And I'm like, well, yeah, because grief is transition. Right. So that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Why you would be feeling grief as we transition, because that's what it is. Right. And then, yes, of course, it's the other funny thing I feel about grief is when you start really kind of feeling and kind of being with those feelings around maybe one specific topic, then all of a sudden you have everything else you've ever grieved of in your entire life come through.
It's like a whack-a-mole, right? Like,
can I take care of one thing at a time? Right. Can I just one?
Nope. How about all of them?
How about all of them? So yeah, so like that, it just, that would make so much sense. And when you broke down the word though, there was like a couple different meanings of grief, right? One was like,
so
burden?
Yeah. So the Latin, the etymology of the word is really to burden. And so as I talked to my friend who's a word nerd, she broke it down even further, and she talked about burden of hardship as well as burden of birthing. And I feel like when she said that to me, my mind was like shattered open on, holy cow, you've got to be kidding me. This makes so much sense to me. And I know it might be stretchy for others listening, perhaps, yet childbearing is a really strenuous experience. There's a lot that goes on with it, and grief experience of birthing a baby, getting through that whole process of pregnancy and then having a child that's outside of you and all of it. And grief can be heavy and it can be life.
Yeah.
And again, I'm still trying to play with what are the words that land for people, but I'm like, wow.
Yeah. I get it too. And I feel like if we go back to the transition of it's making room for something new and not knowing, because when I first read that, I kind of had a instant reaction where I was like, oh, well then does that mean I have to get rid of something so that something else can come in? And it's like, well, yeah.
Maybe
a little bit.
I think maybe, right? We can't hold on to everything and have a backpack with all our history and our past versions of ourselves. Yeah, we can bring some things along the journey, and that's okay because we become larger humans. I think, as we grow, there's more capacity.
For sure. And we get to choose.
Yeah.
And yeah. So yeah, this idea of making room for something new, but it's just of birth is new. That's what I think of it when I think of birth, and of course all of the labor that comes along with it, and then here there is something new.
Yes. Yeah. Is it? I just think it's cool to think of it in new perspective.
Yeah. I think it's required to think of it in new perspective if we want people to be able to hold this new space for it and not be terrified of it and not be afraid of it, and to be able to talk about it with each other. Like we just said, you need witness. If you feel like you can't talk about this with anyone because grief is bad and whatever, or you don't want to be a burden on someone else, and all of those stories that we can make up, then it's how can't we have to shift it in some way, I think.
And I really feel as I look around and notice, I think we're all hungry for this right now, so it is it's October of 2025 when we're recording this, and it feels like grief has been building, from the pandemic, from everyone's personal situations. Agree. It's we need to start discussing this in a deeper way.
Yeah. And I think the consequence of not doing it is really not living in our full humanness and really not getting to know ourselves. Yeah. And if we don't know ourselves, we can't share ourselves. And I think that's the whole purpose, that's the whole purpose. It's a tragedy to go through life and not be able to show who you are, to show who you really are, to really get to know yourself.
I agree.
And a part of all of ourselves is grief.
Yes.
So if we can't get to know us as whole beings without also knowing that.
Right. It's, I think if we want to go to the mountaintops, the big joys and highs of life, we do absolutely have to visit the valleys as well, or we're just going to be on a mediocre plane. And I'm not criticizing that. I just also know that I'm someone who wants the highs. So then I get to have the lows. It's the yin and yang.
Yeah. And I think it takes courage.
Yes.
To do this work.
Yeah. We all have to be so brave and vulnerable and stretchy, stretch out of our comfort zones.
Yeah. And that's really difficult. And I feel these are the conversations, and this is the work that I want to do, is to support people, and you will be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's going to be really uncomfortable probably.
Yeah. And
there's light that comes through, and there's parts of yourself that you didn't know, and levels of love that you can experience for yourself, for others,
yes.
You just, you need a companion with you on it for sure. But you can do it. We all can do it.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful that you have this conversation, that, kind of the What the Fit does have your background of wellness.
Yeah.
And yet I'm just so intrigued at your ability to bring in the conversation about grief and how that's foundational in everything that you're bringing forward.
Yeah, because I just see it so much. I feel like as you do that, like it's life.
Yes.
Like it's
everywhere.
It is.
Yeah.
And if we want to be fit, however we think about that answer, which is the point of the podcast, that it's different for everyone. It means so many different things. And really what it's getting down to is like, what does it mean to like feel who you really are?
Yeah.
To really like be who you really are,
Yes.
What does that mean to you? But yeah, it's just so important to me. It's so important to me because I've said this many times before, but like I don't want to be someone who runs away from grief. I want to like meet it.
Yeah.
I really do. Like I want to have the courage to do that.
Yeah. I had a friend who, in the process of me writing the book, he was willing to let me share in the book, in the back, a letter that grief wrote to him. So it was a journaling experience that he did, and he just wrote down whatever flowed. And it was as if grief was talking to him. And then some weeks later, he wrote a letter in response. And so there's some tools and some things to kind of play with and
Definitely.
to
And
consider.
you have some like work. You have some kind of like workbook.
Exactly, some questions for discernment, journaling, and
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm just so grateful for people who have contributed and been willing to share their stories. And I feel like that's where we can continue to invite people in.
Yeah, because you'll pull in other people, your own stories, other people's stories. I know in the back part of the book is a lot of interviews with people, and you ask those two really important questions. What would you say to grief? What would grief say to you?
Right.
Which I love, and like I'm really, that's got my mind spinning and percolating. I know when we initially met, you asked me that question. I'm not exactly sure what I said, but it's something that I like to ruminate on for sure. Before we transition to kind of talk about, ways that you like to take care of yourself, what is kind of from your perspective, what is your message that you want to deliver with this book? Or like what, why should people read it? Why should people consume that?
Yeah. Well, to your point, I believe that we are all grieving. And I also don't believe that has to be heavy and burdensome. And the other message that I feel very strongly about is we're all going to break. And there's a gift that I found that I'm like, oh, this says it really well. It's a picture of an egg and it has a crack in it. And the message is, if we break from external pressure, if an egg breaks from external pressure, it represents death. If it breaks from internal pressure, it represents life. And I was like, oh, yeah, duh, that's so clear. And what occurred to me was there wasn't a question of if the egg is going to break or not. It's a given. It's going to break at some point. And so how is that happening? And that's where I believe, again, grief requires a witness, is where we get to step out of ourselves and say, hey, can you listen to me? Can you give me some Kleenex while I cry my face off? Whatever it might look like. Can you bring some meals? Can you, whatever, pick up a workload for me? That breaking is inviting others into the grief with us so that we're not alone. And I again think that everyone is really hungry to understand, how can I move through whatever grief I'm living in my life? And really the genius is the break. So don't be afraid of it and don't resist it, and start to play with, well, what does that even mean? And what would that look like for me logistically and, in real terms? So just to get more familiar with breaking.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. So what do you have to do, Krista, to take care of yourself, amidst partnering and community and work and writing a book and, all of the things that we all do every single day of our lives? How do you take care of yourself? What are some of your favorite ways?
So a couple of my super easy go-tos are breath work, where I exhale longer than I inhale. And that creates a lot of calm and stability for my nervous system. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm doing some really good stuff for myself in such a simple way that I can do when I'm in a meeting or I'm at home on the couch. Oh, I love that. That's a big one.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I'm loving this question right now to talk to people as I'm in this place of like really new routine and I have to let go of this like past version of myself to make space for this new version of myself. Like I have to, and I've been resistant to do it. I've been like, well, I can keep the same thing I've been doing before in this new,
and just like, add something else.
It's like, no, we've got to radically change it up.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
so
I'm like,
so love
how can we
hearing-
do radical while also simple, right?
Yes,
like the keep
no,
it
for
simple,
sure.
silly.
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be. But okay.
So a lot of breath
love that.
work. I've just recently adopted a new way for myself professionally because work requires so much time and energy, where every single week I declare 3 accomplishable priorities and 3 things I'm going to touch that are ongoing work.
Okay.
And so by narrowing it to 3, I feel super accomplished. I'm like, they might be big things, but I know I can get them done in a week versus a list of like 12 things or 20 that I used to have that just feel daunting, right?
I have to turn into a robot.
Yeah.
This is the thing, is that like that I have to turn into a robot to get it done. Can I do it? Absolutely.
Right.
I love turning into a robot. I don't have to feel anything.
Yeah.
But that just takes me out of where I know I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, we can't,
Right.
we can't have both.
Yeah.
You can't be a robot and a human.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. So I guess maybe the like underneath that strategy that I'm deploying is permission to slow down.
Oh, yeah.
Permission to take longer to accomplish things.
I love that so much.
Yeah, that's a big one. And then I would say like my high on the list is also my sleep. So, I've been going through medically induced menopause as well as insomnia and all sorts of things. And I'm using my team, my medical team, and we're figuring out like how do we combat the insomnia? And I know that I need sleep. Like, I mean, we all do, right? To different degrees.
What a demonic plague, insomnia.
Yeah.
What an absolutely horrible thing for a human to experience.
Yeah.
The one thing that you need the most is taken away from you.
Right. And you can lay in bed and yet it does not come, right?
It's terrible.
Yeah. So how I take care of myself is going through a process of a sleep study and really diving into like, how can we make sure my sleep has ritual and routine so that it creates wellness.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's a big one. Good for you. That's an important piece to tackle.
Yeah.
It's
big, so I think my things are really foundational, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's
breathe, slow down, sleep.
Yeah.
Certainly movement, nutrition, all of those things, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. Okay, Krista, we've come to the very big question of this podcast. What does being fit mean to you?
Being fit to me means intentionality with my self-awareness and my energy.
Yeah.
And so I think about body, mind, and spirit fitness. Yeah. And through my life, I've been really focused on my mind and my spirit. I've neglected my body. And at this phase of life, I'm finally being aware of my body and listening to it. And so sometimes that means saying no to things I absolutely want to be a yes to.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it means showing up bigger, right? Like sometimes if I'm like, oh, I feel sluggish and, but like, is that sluggish because I ate something poor or is it because I'm really low energy, right?
Yeah.
And like, so saying yeses and nos, like, again, I think it's just really the deep self-awareness and being really intentional with my energy.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Good grief. A catalyst. What is it? Good grief.
Inviting grief to be a catalyst for growth.
To be a catalyst for growth. Where, when can people seek this out and where can they find it?
Yeah, people can go to my website, kristapowers.com.
Yes.
And there's links there for both of my books. Good Grief will be out the very end of October of 2025. So it'll be on all major platforms and available through my publisher as well. So it will be out there, and I'm grateful for anyone who wants to engage in the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. This is
so
important. I woke up this morning and was just like, this is the purpose of my work. Like, this is good stuff. So I really appreciate you being a part of it.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at Chrissy Gurley and at What the Fit Podcast. Full video episodes will be available on Spotify and YouTube, so follow and subscribe. If you're loving What the Fit, please help spread the word. Send it to a friend, share it to your story, and if you're looking for even more exclusive content, become a Patreon member. You can find it at patreon.com/whatthefitpodcast.